Our interview this morning is with Jack L. Drain. Jack was born in Dallas, Texas, April of 1929. He served in the United States Air Force from December of 1950 through August of 1971. His highest rank attained was Lieutenant Colonel, 05. This interview is being conducted in Burleson, Texas on Friday, July the 9th, 2010. Interview is conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress and also Operation Remember for the City of Burleson. My name is Dale Dexheimer. I am not related to Mr. Drain in any way. Also in the room are Carolyn Drain, Jack's wife, and Milton Gibson and Gary Burton, who are the video guys. And with that, Jack, you can tell us your story, sir, as you want to tell it, your life in the U.S. Air Force.
Fine. In 2002, I started out to put down my memoirs for the purpose of giving it to my children. And it grew and grew, and several people began to read it, and we received a lot of encouragement about it, and were encouraged to put it into a book form, which I did in 2009, excuse me. And the book has now been out for about a year, and Carolyn and I are touring the area and speaking at engagements all over the area, specifically for military organizations, churches and Lions clubs and Optimist and other organizations. The book is primarily concerned with a short fuse, and that short fuse happens to be a problem that we had in Vietnam, and I'm going to tell you why the book has that name, because this is the heart of the story. The book is actually about three men. It's about myself, it's about a Colonel Thomas N. Moe, who was a POW for 5.5 years across the hall from John McCain and introduced by Sarah Palin in the 2008 Republican National Convention. Then the other man is Lieutenant Lance Sargent, who died as a POW on the way to Hanoi, and his story is quite gripping. And these stories are both written in the second half of the book. The first half is my life, which kind of prepares you for that second half so that you'll know that the training that I received is also the training that they received before they encountered these extreme difficult situations. And Tom has readily admitted in his part of the story that we were well prepared as best we could be to be prisoners of war. And he endured a terrible 5 years. Tom, of course, is quite bitter because Tom's airplane was blown up by our own bombs. We were flying in Da Nang in 1967 and 1968 in F-4s, flying two-ship formations, and we started losing aircraft. They would leave, go on missions, and not come back. And so we began to think out the situation, because normally if you get hit by any aircraft fire, there is time to say something or to eject. None of that was happening. We had no stories and no conclusions to so many of these missions. And these are F-4s with two people in each aircraft, a guy in front and a guy in back, both of them full pilots with full controls in both seats. And it would appear that there should be some evidence of what happened to them, but there wasn't. The only reasonable conclusion we could come to is that the bombs were going off as soon as released from the airplane and disintegrating. And so we were getting to the point, we had a new fuse. We had a problem in Vietnam earlier on, and it's quite a unflattering account of the fact that about 30% of everything we dropped in Vietnam did not go off. So we had a problem of them not exploding at all. So they had developed a new fuse. Honeywell had a fuse called the FMU-35, which was a multi-purpose fuse that could be set on the ground for the bomb to go off at 500 feet above the ground, 100 feet above the ground, on impact, or could even bury up and become a landmine for a truck that would drive across it. And you could put them in a harbor if you wanted to as well. So the bomb had the fuse had a really great purpose, and apparently it was quite effective because we carried a lot of them and they didn't blow up underneath our airplanes. So it was not something that where all of the fuses were bad. It's where some were bad and we didn't know which ones. So anyway, we were at the point of almost saying that we're not willing to fly those missions with those fuses because we suspected them. And so they sent some Honeywell people up from Saigon who inspected our fuse storage area and everything and said that everything was okay. So we started to use the fuses again. And the first mission was a sky spot mission of 2 aircraft that were going to fly over the clouds and then drop their bombs from a radar directed drop. It's usually what we did in bad weather. And sometimes we would do that in 2-ship formations or even more. But this particular flight was a 2-ship formation. And Tom and all of the other 3 crew members all were concerned very much about these fuses they were going to carry. So they briefed the mission that when they got to the position of releasing the bombs, they were all 4 going to pull back on the stick at the instant those bombs came off the airplane, try to get as much separation as they could from the bombs before if they did go off, they would have a chance. They did that, and sure enough, the bombs went off, blew the airplanes to pieces, but all 4 of them ejected. Tom was clear enough and calm enough on his way down from 22,000 feet where they ejected to pull out his emergency radio and call back and tell us the bombs went off underneath the airplanes. And that was the first proof we had that we had faulty fuses. Anyway, they all floated down in enemy territory. We rescued 3 of the people. Tom was the only one captured. And so he was the one that got caught. But the rest of them we got back. And so there are 3 other living representatives, 3 other witnesses to that event. I'm not in touch with all three of them. I am in touch with Tom. At any rate, he was captured and then he was taken to Hanoi and stayed there, as I said. The other lieutenant, Lieutenant Lance Sargent, who is quite well known on the internet, and if you Google him, you will get a tremendous amount of information. He was in the back seat with my squadron commander, a full Colonel John Armstrong, who came from Dallas, and we have since met his wife and everything. But he had that happen, and Lance was able to get out of the airplane. He ejected, but he was injured. And he drug himself about a half a mile before he was captured and then taken on. He was taken with some other POWs that were on the way to Hanoi. And then Lance got a chance to escape. He overpowered his guard, got away for about 2 hours, and they brought him back, but he had been was beaten up so badly, mistreated so badly. But he was in a group of people who knew what happened to him, and he died. And when they got back after the war was over, then they told the story of Lance Sargent. And Lance was an Air Force Academy graduate, and they awarded him the Medal of Honor for his efforts to escape and to evade, as we were trained to do. Anyway, that kind of tells you how the situation all occurred. And now then I'd like to go back and just kind of tell you how we got to that point in our life story, and how Carolyn and I handled all of the problems that we faced. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I tell my children it was room 2 of the Florence Nightingale Hospital, which now is Baylor, but that's more of a joke than, I guess, a serious thing, but it could have been true. Anyway, 1929 was a bad year, and so my folks were very poor, so we moved back to the farm. But we came back to Dallas. I went through the grade schools in Dallas and graduated from Hillcrest High School, which is now a large school. It was a small country school back then. And then went to Texas Tech, and I was working my way through school and had spent 6 months up in Borger, came back and was working for Carolyn's father. And we were selling cookware at dinner parties around the neighborhood, in the area. And one night, her father brought her out to help me clean up after a dinner party. I thought she was the cutest thing I ever saw. And so I had a little problem because I was engaged to Miss Borger at the time. I had met her while I was working up there, and I had to go up and get my college pen back from Miss Borger and tell her that this wasn't going to work out, which was not a good thing to do. But she was a beautiful girl, and I'm sure she found some nice fellow to marry, and I'm sure she's had a happy life. Anyway, I didn't finish Texas Tech because the Korean War was getting heated up, and I was I wanted to be in the Air Force, and so I enlisted, had gone out and signed up for the aviation cadet program. I'd been given a flight as a child, a young man rather, in a grass field out near where we lived, and thought flying was going to be the best thing, and it was the best thing in the world, and it really was a dream, so I wanted to be a pilot. And I couldn't get a class before my deferment ran out, so I enlisted in the Air Force in December of 1950. And I don't know if you remember now, but about this time we had 80 or 100,000 people enlist in the Air Force about that time. And we were at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. We had people sleeping on the ground without tents or anything because we just didn't have enough time to take them all in. Anyway, I was working on putting up some tents, and they came out and said, "You're an aviation cadet applicant, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, come with me." So they made me a permanent party, issued me a full uniform for the first time, sent me through a 3-week school, and made me a career guidance counselor in the Air Force, which I did for 6 months, counseling people on where to go, assigning them to schools and training and other events, and I had a total of 3 weeks of experience. But anyway, there were quotas on the wall, and I filled those quotas as well as anybody else did. After about 6 months, I did get a class, and I went to Bartow, Florida, for the first 6 months of training in a T6, and we had civilian instructors. It was a great time. Bartow, Florida is not far from any of the beautiful scenes in Florida, and so it was a great place to be. But we were restricted to the base for about 4 of the 6 months we were there. So we finally got out and got to see part of it. And then we came to Sherman, to Perrin Air Force Base for 3 months of training in the T-38, I'm sorry. And we were the first class now at Bartow, Florida. We were the first class at Perrin, and then we were the first class to open up Big Spring when we went down there for the last 3 months of our training in T-33s. The Korean War was really real hot, red hot when we finished, and so our entire class was assigned to go to Korea. Half of us went to F-86 training in Nellis Air Force Base in Phoenix, in Las Vegas. The other half went to Luke Air Force Base for F-84 training near Phoenix. I went to Phoenix. And well, while we were there, I think I ruined, had 3 airplanes come apart on me during that period of time. All kinds of things happened. One particular case, I was on the Gila Bend gunnery range firing machine guns, and pulled up off the target. It was about like this when a hydraulic line ruptured in the cockpit, spraying me and the airplane down with hot hydraulic fluid, soaking all of us in the canopy, and the instrument panels and everything were pretty blurry, and everything was slick. So I elected to land at a 6,000-foot strip that Gila Bend had out by the gunnery range. And I did the traditional thing, or the standard thing of landing the aircraft. You land and put your nose wheel down and then brake heavily to stop. Well, when you lose hydraulic power, then the struts are flat. And when I put that nose down, the airplane bounced about 17 feet back up in the air, and it stalled out and dropped 17 feet and drove the struts right up through the wings almost. And so I really had a tough time getting the aircraft to come to a stop, but got out. Fire trucks were there, picked me up, took me up to the fire station, and I got in the shower and showered for about 30, 40 minutes to get all of that off of me. They gave me some clothes to wear. A helicopter came and took me back to Phoenix, and nothing was ever said about the thing. There was no investigations, no nothing. This was routine. Another airplane caught on fire on the way taxiing back in from landing, and the brake failed. The hydraulic line dropped down on a hot brake and caught on fire out near the end of the runway, so it just burned up. And then I landed on another trip we were on. Landed at night over at San Bernardino. And there was number 6 to land, and the 2 airplanes in front of me had turned around on the active runway and were taxiing back toward me. And I had to leave the runway, and there was a cross runway that I turned onto, but there was a dip in the runways, and it took the left gear off, and I slid down that runway about 1,000 feet, hit the high intensity lights that knocked out turned the field into darkness, And I got out and I'm walking off and there's people running by me saying, "We can't find the pilot." And I said, "It's me." Anyway, I stayed there about a week. We did have an accident investigation board, and then I went off to Korea and never heard any more about that. In Korea, I flew F-84s out of Daegu, or K2 they called it. We were about 100 miles south of the DMZ, and we would fly 4-ship formations normally up there, but we did fly one mission up to the Sinanju bridges on the border of China and North Korea, where they were bringing across supplies and troops and everything, and we had been working on those for several days, but we had a big gaggle of about 93 or 96 airplanes, I don't remember, but we were stretched out across the sky as far as you could see, and from about 50 miles away we could see the bridges and the pattern that we would have to fly to bomb them. It was all outlined in flak. And we were hoping they would run out of ammunition before we got there, but they didn't. And we all went through that, lost several planes, and came back and landed, taxied in, and had got into the chocks. And my crew chief was standing outside, and he looked up at me like, well, what in the world, And he ran underneath the aircraft, and he came back. I got out of the airplane, went down to look. There was a hole about that big in my speed brake. And the speed brake is something you lower when you're on a bomb run to keep your speed from building up too fast so you can pull out at the bottom. A 37 millimeter shell had gone right through the middle of that speed brake and didn't go off. It must have been parallel. I must have been parallel to the flight of that shell, or it would have gone through the aircraft some other way. Anyway, that was just one of the many times that I got hit. We were hit fairly commonly with anti-aircraft weapons and with machine guns in particular. Finished 100 missions in 9 months, 2 weeks before, and got my last mission just 10 days before the war ended, and was waiting. Then I was delayed waiting for the POWs to be expatriated or repatriated, and that was fine with me because I was in a hurry to get home, but not that big a hurry. So when they got them all back, then I got a plane back to Hawaii. They took my plane again to bring in some more some POWs they had brought to Hawaii to give them medical care and attention before they brought them back to the States. And I was about a week late getting back to our marriage, but that was no big deal. We got married, and then we went to our next assignment, which was Yuma, Arizona, and I was in the Air Defense Command. And the Yuma was their gunnery school. I was being shot at again. I was pulling targets, and at first we were pulling a target about 1,000 feet behind the aircraft, and they were firing machine gun bullets at it. Then we went to the more sophisticated aircraft. I checked out in a B-45, had a big tow reel in the bomb bay, and we could let out about 5,000 feet of armored cable and pull a 9x45 radar reflective target so they could fire rockets at it. And on one of those missions, the student was always under a hood. He had a hood that he couldn't see, simulating weather conditions, and he had a chase plane beside him to tell him when to fire and when not to. And he had to have clearance before he could fire to make sure that he had the target and not me. Well, we had a kid that was really excited. He had his finger down on the microphone. We could hear him breathing. And when he called for clearance, he never let up on the microphone and didn't hear the turn down or the rejection of his firing, but he fired anyway. The rockets went all the way around our airplane. 24 2.75-inch rockets missed our airplane, which brings up a question. That was supposed to be an enemy plane they were shooting at. And if the system didn't shoot me down, how would it shoot down an enemy plane? Also, I'm sure that when he got back, his commander tore him apart, so I never bothered to look him up. But we were just grateful to be alive. Those rockets were not armed. I mean, they didn't have warheads in them, but they would have punched some huge holes in the airplane had they hit it, and it could have been a real disaster. Anyway, those things were just routine kind of things that we had happen. I had that tow reel. One day we lost control of the cable, and it ran out so fast that it exploded in the bomb bay and just shredded everything in there, except it didn't hit any of the hydraulic lines, fuel lines, or electrical lines. And we came back and just opened the bomb day, and it just dropped out in the bottom on the right ramp, and really was a real mess. Anyway, we had 2 children while we were in Yuma, and then we packed up and they sent us to Châteauroux, France, which is right in the middle of France, beautiful country. And I was a squadron commander there and flew several different airplanes there. On one occasion, I had an opportunity to pick up a C-47, or actually a seated C-47 with seats in it, as opposed to being a cargo plane, that belonged to the Air Attaché in Pretoria, South Africa. And then we brought it back to Châteauroux, loaded up with supplies and stuff, and we had gone to Paris and picked up the visas on our passports to go to all the countries we were going to go, and we went down the east coast of Africa to get to Pretoria and came back out the west coast. 21 days, 7,000 miles, and had a wonderful trip because we were met by the Air Attaché or embassy at every place. When we got down to Pretoria, we gave him this airplane that had been overhauled and picked up a cargo plane to come back out in. Anyway, we were supposed to be there 4 years, but after about 2 years, we were the Air Force Logistics Command for Europe, and we had a contract with a Spanish aircraft company called CASA in Seville, Spain. And we were taking our T-33, going to take our T-33s there for repair and maintenance, and then they would come back and get them. And when they came back to get them, I had to test fly them and accept them back for the Air Force. So I got the job of being a test pilot in a Spanish aircraft factory, which is a very rare job that people almost never get, and was a really cushy assignment. And Carolyn we had a living made. Life was good. We enjoyed Seville, Spain. Spain and France are so different, but so interesting. Now, when you're in the military, you have 2 choices, and you're overseas. You can travel or you can buy things, but you can't do both on your income, no matter what rank you are. We elected to travel, so we traveled most of the time while we were in France, and we did the same in Spain and got as far as Algeria and all those sorts of things together. The time came for me to come. They gave me an assignment to come back to the States for 3 months to attend a contract administration officer school at Wright Pat. And I did that, and then went back to Spain and finished up my other 2 years of tour. And then they sent us back to Brookley Air Force Base in Mobile, Alabama. And I was the division chief of a unit of 110 women who were buying more items and spending more money than Sears and Roebuck and Chrysler and Ford and all the other big companies, Montgomery Ward, everybody you can think of, because we were also buying for the Air Force, but we were also buying for the space program. My job, it turned out, was to manage this group of women who were brilliant and really nice, but they were abusing their sick leave, and they were abusing their overtime. And so I had, and several other incidental things that they had found on inspection. And my job was to correct all of that. It was about 4 months before they called me anything that didn't start with a B. But finally, after that, I got their respect, and we started getting things shaped up. And then for some reason, I got a change of jobs. I'm not sure who ordered that for me, but they gave it to me. They sent me back to Enid, Oklahoma, and Vance Air Force Base to be an instructor pilot, where I taught flying in the T-37. And then we added a light plane to the program, and I was the chief of the light plane division and moved over to Woodring, the civilian airfield, and had a civilian contract set of pilots that we taught how to fly the way we wanted them to fly and how to teach the way we wanted to teach. And we gave each group of 60 students that came to us 30 hours of flying time in a T-41, which is actually a Cessna 172. And then they went to the T-37 training and then on into the T-38 training and finished up their program. We graduated during the period of time that I was there about 1,350 of the finest pilots the Air Force has ever seen. These guys were all college graduates. They knew how to study, they knew how to learn, they knew how to listen, and they knew how to do anything you wanted them to do, and they could just learn about anything. And they were precision pilots. We were very proud of them. We never hurt one of them, and we didn't tear up any airplanes. And so we had a really great record to be very proud of. I was working with, I thought, some of the finest men in America, and I still do believe that the Air Force people that I worked with were some of our, and we were told this all the time we were going through our training. So you get the idea that after a while, maybe you are a little bit different, and that's why some of them get a little cocky, I guess. But anyway, you are told that you're the cream of the American crop when you're going through pilot training. And we didn't argue with that at all. Anyway, it came time then for me to come back, to go back to war. They gave me an assignment to Vietnam as a helicopter pilot. And I didn't normally contest any of the assignments that they gave me, but I contested this one because I had never been to a helicopter school, wasn't qualified to be a helicopter pilot, and did not want to go to Vietnam in a helicopter. And I told them that. And so when I went in to complain, they said, "Jack, we've checked. You've got more helicopter time than anybody on the airplane, on the base." And I said, "Yeah, but you need to know how I got the time. When we were in Yuma, Arizona, the base commander liked to shoot rabbits out of the back of the base helicopter, and the base operations officer was a helicopter pilot, and I got to go along with him and long flying time while the base commander was shooting rabbits out of the back of the airplane." And they said, "Well, that sounds a little fishy, but we'll accept it." So they took that assignment back and gave me an F4 assignment. And then I left and went to 3 weeks of survival school up along the Washington, Idaho, Canadian border. And that school was probably the most intense and most fantastic school that I ever attended. I would never want to do it again. Nobody else did either. But they did their job. And at one part of the program, we were captured, taken as prisoners, and we were kept up for 3 days and 3 nights while they tried every trick in the world to try to take advantage of us and to beat us down. And after 2 or 3 days of no sleep, you lose touch with reality. When we got back and we were being debriefed, I mentioned to them that it was curious that all of the guards that were watching us had accents, real strong accents. And I said, "Where'd you get these guys?" And they said, "Well, to tell you the truth, they're Germans. We brought them back over here from World War II. Their job in World War II was guarding American prisoners. So they were the real thing, and they knew exactly how to do it and how to do it right." So we received some excellent training for being a prisoner of war. In fact, at one point in time, I thought I was more competent to be a POW than I was a fighter pilot. But be that as it may, it was just to give you an emphasis on how much training they did give us. Then we went to Vietnam, as I say, in 1967, and we were flying those missions. I got out in Vietnam in 7 months with 168 missions, 100 missions up north, and 68 missions of what they called in-country missions. Those were inside South Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And of course, at that time, we were not telling people we were doing that, but the Cambodians knew it, the Laotians knew it, and we knew it, the North Vietnamese knew it, the South Vietnamese knew it. Everybody knew it except the Americans back home, which was kind of a disturbing thing. My book has the stories of those missions and some commentary about my opinion of them. We were flying around the clock. All of the planes we were just going as hard as we could, and the reason for that was one of the 2 things that America does, or that we do to win wars. Number 1, we try to get air superiority. And number 2, we try to have the best material support you could have. We overwhelm our enemies with their ability to keep control of the air, and to overwhelm them with supplies and materials and men, whatever it is. And so we had 70 ships in the harbor at Da Nang, almost for 15 years unloading stuff we had to drop or had to carry off and had to get rid of some way. So we were flying every 30 minutes to an hour as fast as we could fly them, carrying as much ordnance as we could, with the idea with the instructions not to bring it back. Now there's a place, and I have not heard anything about this since I left there, but I'm curious to know what has happened to a area of the sea about 10 miles off the coast of Vietnam where we dumped all of that stuff we didn't use. There's got to be an ocean floor out there that is covered with tons and tons and tons of weapons that were dropped in the safe mode in the ocean. And I do know that a lot of the things that didn't go off in the Southeast Asia are still being found and uncovered, and there is a special UN team that is working to try to disarm all of those, and people are still being killed from some of the stuff we dropped over there, even at this point. And it will probably go on for quite a while because there was just so much of it over the time that we were there. We just dropped it everywhere. And so anyway, I finished up the tour in Vietnam, and I had a bad situation that happened at the end. My backseater decided that he wanted to move up to the front seat, and they made an offer to 6 people in our wing that if they would sign up for 25 more combat missions up north, they would let them check out in the front seat and fly in the F-4. And it was a dream position, a dream airplane, really. It was the best airplane I ever flew. And my backseater signed up for that program. I tried to talk him out of it, and was heartbroken that he didn't. But then when he decided to do it, I flew in the back seat for my last 15 combat missions in North Vietnam, checking him out. Now, I had been an instructor pilot for about 3.5 years, and I knew what I was doing, and he was a great pilot to begin with because I let him fly from back there all the time anyway. And so I was very confident that he knew what he was doing, but on his 105th mission, he was killed. And that broke my heart. I heard about it 30 days after I got back home. And really was heartbreaking because we had become very close, of course, during that 160 missions that we flew. Not always with each other, but we had both had a full combat tour. And I got back home, and they checked me out in the, they assigned me to Carswell, Fort Worth, and sent me out to Castle Air Force Base in California, and I became a KC-135 tanker aircraft commander with a crew, and served a year in SAC on alert. That's 1 week of being out there day and night for 7 days and nights, and then being off for a week, but you're flying during the day and doing other things during that week you're off. And it was about this time, and it was getting close to my retirement, we had a family situation come up, and we had Carolyn's sister had married a lieutenant and was pregnant when he was sent to Vietnam. And he was killed in an F-100 about 2 years before we got there. But when I got back from Vietnam, things had deteriorated pretty badly, and she was in bad shape. And so the court appointed us, Carolyn and I, the guardians of her and her 2 children. And then Carolyn got pregnant, and we had a 5th child before I retired. She was, I think, one of the few lieutenant colonel's wives in that hospital that ever had a baby at a later age. Anyway, that was our youngest child, making us 5 children. We now have 12 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, and we have a wonderful family, wonderful family. But we thought the lady would recover and take her 2 children, but she never did. She died at an early age, and we kept the children. They're still our children. We raised them. They were 2 and 4 when we got them, and they're full grown now and both active in the community. And that brings me now to my civilian life. I got out and went to work in finance fields. How much time do we have? I got out and worked for several, Mellon Bank for one, and several other financial companies, and did equipment leasing for about 10 or 12 years. And then one of my neighbors who owned 13 pharmacies asked me to come on board and to help build a prescription drug claim processing company. And I did that for the next 10 years, and I left, and about 2 years later, they sold the company off to CVS, and it's now in a 4 or 5 story building at the intersection of 183 and Loop 820, and they have about 140 employees, and it's a big operation. It became a great thing. And when I left, I had 44,000 pharmacies signed up to accept our prescription drug card, which was a pretty big operation. Then after that, I started visiting in the hospital, found out that I needed to be a chaplain to get access to all of the rooms, not just my church's group. And so my church anointed me a chaplain. I turned those papers in at the hospital and then had free reign at the hospital. But I spent most of my time for a year at the osteopathic hospital in Fort Worth and visiting with rooms there. And the lady that was the paid chaplain or full-time chaplain set up a little school for me to help me get started, and she was magnificent in it with her training and prepared me for a lot of the things that I would face visiting hospital rooms. Some of the finest days of my life were visiting those people in the hospital. They're good people, but they're sick. And I unfortunately became one of them several times. We've had several health problems of our own since then. I'm 81 now. Looking back on over 81 years of life, I can see the hand of God in a lot of things that happened to me. I firmly believe that He has a plan for us, and that if you look back, He gives you pretty good vision. He doesn't give you much forward vision sometimes, but you can see things in your life that couldn't have happened any other way unless they were planned by somebody, and I didn't plan them. So I believe that He did. I want to stop and go back to one particular flight that I want to close with, or if that's okay. And that is the flight that they gave us while we were checking out in the F-4 at George Air Force Base near Victorville, California, and close to Apple Valley as well, where Roy Rogers and Trigger were. Anyway, one day they gave us a clean F-4. And a clean F-4 means that there's no racks or rails or tanks or anything hanging on the airplane. There's nothing outside the airplane except the basic airplane itself. And they gave me an instructor pilot in the back seat to talk me through this. We taxied out and he said, take off and climb to 50,000 feet over Death Valley, which we did. And then he said, put it in a dive about 35 degrees, full afterburner. And we did that, and at 35,000 feet, I hit 2.33 Mach, and that's 1,400 and some odd miles an hour. Pull back on the stick. He told me to pull back on the stick, and we rode it out at the top at 77,000 feet. There's no air up there. So we fell. When it quit flying, we just fell. It didn't flame out. It just fell 25,000 feet before I got enough air over the controls to get control of the aircraft again. And he said, I think we need to land because we're about out of fuel. But it was the most marvelous flight that I ever took in an F-4, designed primarily to show you the capability of the aircraft for knowing what you could do with it if you had to, and to give you an experience that very few people ever have. They don't have that ride at Disneyland. And that's as close as I came to being an astronaut, was 77,000 feet. But it was a ride I will never forget, and was really wonderful. The aircraft itself, as I said, was the best airplane I built. It was primarily designed for atomic weapons. And we were trained to do a labs maneuver with them. That's where you come in low over the ground, pull up, and kind of like a McDonald's loop, you drop the bombs on the way up and they go that way, and you go this way to do an emmelment to get away from the blast. And when the blast will take out Fort Worth and Dallas, accuracy is not too big a point, so you don't worry about where it hits. Thank goodness I never flew one of those missions. If you have questions, I think I can answer them.
Just a couple of quickies. You're pretty good at this interview thing. Number one, hold the book up facing
okay.
the camera, Jack.
All right.
And if we wanted to get that, if we went online,
Yes.
go to...
The book belongs to a 501c3. I formed a 501c3 and put the book in it. It's a charity that we're producing, we're running. And it's can be obtained online at www.mylifeonloan, that's one word, .com. www.mylifeonloan.com. And then I'll mail the book to you. It's not in bookstores. We're selling them in person throughout the area, and we still have a few left in our garage.
I was going to ask, you said that you've talked to veterans associations, et cetera, but you have not had a book signing at, say, Borders or?
I did not
others?
put the book in the bookstores, no.
Okay.
That's a whole nother world.
Gotcha. Number 2, initial training in a T6. Good golly.
Yeah. By,
Have
by,
you been back in one in the last 10,
Oh.
20 years?
oh gosh, no. And the first mission, Bo Shuford was my civilian instructor. And the first mission, and I remember I'd been in one airplane in my life before this, and that was a light airplane and flew not too long. But he decided to demonstrate the capabilities of a T-6, his prowess as a pilot, and his ability to demonstrate the full capability of the aircraft, and which we did. I was never so scared in my life. And I had that fear of flying for the next 21 years. But anyway, I got over it enough to do all the things I did. I ended up with 5,000 hours of flying time, mostly single engine, chest full of ribbons, enough thrills to last me a lifetime. Never applied for a flying job when I retired from the military because I didn't know what else I would do next that would be anywhere near as interesting as what I had done for those 21 years. And also, I think I had used up all the luck that my angels were going to give
All
me.
those 9 lives.
All those 9 lives, I think, were all used up. But I had other interest at the time, and so.
Excuse me. Carolyn went with you to France
And Spain. Yes,
Was that pretty much the extent when you went to Korea, when you went to Nam, she stayed in Texas?
When I went to Korea, we weren't married.
Okay.
So she was still in school. She was finishing up high school. When I went to Vietnam, then we moved her to Brownwood, which was near her father's farm, our mother and father's farm. Beside, they had farm ranch south of Brownwood, and I wanted her to be close to her relatives. And while she was there, she went to Howard Payne, got her college, some college education. But it was really kind of a hometown for her because she had grown up there and then had gone back and lived there to graduate from high school. So she had a lot of friends there, and it was a real nice, I think, time for her. In fact, when I came back, she stayed and finished out the year at Howard Payne and let the kids finish school while I did the castle training, and then we came back and all moved to Dallas. I mean, moved to Hearst, really.
Pretty mundane question, but a B-45 tow plane?
Yes, that was the American first production line jet bomber, 4 engines. There was the version of it that I had was the a bomber version of it, but there was another version, and since that time, I've heard some people speak over at the Legends of Flight Museum who flew the very first U-2 type missions in a B-45 and penetrated China and Russia on reconnaissance missions. They had no weapons. And they tell some fantastic stories about the B-45. In order for each mission to be flown, this is all declassified now, in order for each mission to be flown, it had to have the approval of the Prime Minister of England and the President of the United States. And it became such a touchy thing that we turned the airplanes over to Britain, England, and we flew them over there, and they put them in a hangar, and they came out English airplanes, and they all flew with English emblems on them from then on.
Roundels.
Yeah. Interesting story.
Last question. Both Korea and Vietnam. Ever been back? Ever have any desire to go back?
No, I have some friends that took a tour of both places, and I understand that South Korea is magnificent. I saw some pictures of Nagasaki and Hiroshima that sure do look a whole lot better than Detroit does. And I have never really had any desire to go back other than to take Carolyn back to Japan and to show her, for her to see the Far East. We didn't get to do that. I've taken her on cruises in the Mediterranean. We've done that. I've been back to Spain once on a mission for 30 days in the tanker. But and we have traveled all over the rest of the country, but and some of the world. I couldn't get it back I haven't gotten it back to Far East.
That's all I have, sir. Any closing comment you might make, or?
No, I thank you for this opportunity to do this. Of course, we're speaking all over the area. We're looking for places to speak. We do 3 to 6 a week, and we have been very well received wherever we went, and it's been a lot of fun. We've met some of the world's finest people again, because they're in most of these organizations that we speak to. Carolyn has been a real trooper. She usually is the one that gives me the cutoff signal, and so you took her job today, but she corrects me when I forget things, and she remembers things I don't remember, and we work pretty good together. But it's been a lot of fun.
Well, we certainly appreciate the time from both of you.
Well, thank you.
It's a great story.
I'm anxious to see how this comes out.
You bet. We appreciate.
I hope that it will mean something. One of the things that we do in our talks is we really do insist and push for everyone there, no matter if you're military or not, to write your stories down. Because if you came to a chasm and you built a bridge across it, don't make your kids build another bridge. Tell them your story and how you faced your troubles and your trials, and leave it for them. I think the kids really, eventually, as they get older, are more and more curious about what their parents did, and we're trying to help enforce the idea that everyone should leave a record. I mean, don't waste your time and experience when it could be used by somebody else.
Good advice.
In any field, not just military.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.